Welcome back, or welcome to the second session, and the last talk we're going to do today is getting code out the door. It's a panel discussion, as you can see, so we're really hoping that it can be interactive, and we're really going to be looking for your involvement, questions and answers. But first, please allow me to make a public service announcement. Next Wednesday, March 12th at 6 p.m., there's going to be a Google developer group, another panel discussion. It's going to be here on Google Campus. It's open to the public. For more details, there's a website. You can just Google Developer Group. Van in the back has some details on it. He's a program manager with our developer relations team. I also have the details. So if anyone's interested, look for one of us afterwards, or yeah, Google it. Okay, cool. Again, hi. Some of you have seen me all afternoon. I'm almost done. My name again is Rebecca Chavez. I'm a technical program manager. Here on the panel we have Shuba. I knew this was going to get me.
Subramanian.
Thank you. She's a product manager. We have Anya Kogan. She is an interaction designer. We have Irene Chung, Sui, a software engineer here at Google, a software engineer lead. So we'll get to hear from her. Sabrina Williams. She's a software engineer in test. So she's going to talk to us about what she does. And then Sabrina Farmer. And she is another engineering lead here on our SRE team. And so the general idea of getting code out the door, we're going to make it pretty simple, and we're just going to talk about a very kind of general pipeline. Again, I mentioned some of the roles here. The ladies will go into what they do more specifically, but just to give you a high level, Shuba's role, the product manager, it's really the strategic aspect of product. Understanding user requirements, helping prioritize feature development. Anya then makes it the best experience ever. And so her team really works closely with product team to get the right visuals or get the right user experience. Irene, then it's her groups are where the rubber gets the road. They codify it. They code that experience. Sabrina's groups, they make sure that when you are launching this code, you're not in the process breaking somebody else's code, or it's, they build out the test suites and the tooling and the framework to make sure that when you launch the feature, it's going to work as you expect it. And then Sabrina Farmer, her groups just make it run. There's a lot of unique challenges to Google's scale and complexity, and Sabrina's teams really kind of are the guardians in production and making sure that that code is, once it's out there, it's healthy and running well. So, gosh. Again, sorry, you might, and then I'm a program manager. And so I get the opportunity of working with all of these different phases. And it's not like serial at all, this pipeline. It's very iterative, and we have an opportunity to work kind of across, not in this kind of cyclical idea of product development. But yes, I get to work with all of these really amazing women. So, I'm going to turn it over, let these ladies introduce themselves and talk a bit more about their role in getting code out the door, and then we'll go to questions.
Okay. Hi, I'm Shuba Subramanian, and I'm a product manager at Google. Specifically, I work on Google+, and my role is to basically work on all of the data that is created in the stream and then share it across other Google products and with third parties. I've been at Google for 8 years now, and I've worked in a couple different capacities at Google as a web developer and then as a UI designer, and am now a product manager. As a product manager, I definitely have to come up with a strategy for my product and then kind of help prioritize a whole bunch of different problems that we could be trying to solve with that product, and then see which one of those we could attack first, which one of those is, which ones are feasible to do and which ones we need to kind of put on the back burner. End up working with all of these ladies, and as Rebecca mentioned, it's not usually typically like first I come up with an idea and then I go talk to Anya. Ideas come from a lot of different places. Sometimes Eng comes up with ideas, sometimes our users come up with the ideas, or we get a mandate from leadership, like this is the direction we should be going in, and then we'll kind of think about, okay, if this is the direction we need to go in, or if this is the problem we need to solve, what is the right strategy to do that, and how do we get that, and how do we do it for the short term and the long term. I also end up working with a lot of other folks who are not represented here, folks who are in security, privacy, legal teams, etc. Oh, did you talk about it? Yours?
So I'm Anya, I'm the user experience designer, and my job is to take the product or business strategy that someone like Shuba would have come up with, and with that in mind, go and talk to all the various people who might be using our products. So in my case, I work for AdWords. I've been working for AdWords for 2.5 years. It's our main advertising platform, so where businesses get to use to sell their products and services. So I will talk to those businesses, I will talk to the people using AdWords and get a better understanding of what their needs and behaviors are. And then with that in mind, I create mock-ups, I might create prototypes using like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That's about as far as I get into code. I'll let the rest of these ladies handle the rest of that. And I often partner with a tech lead or SWE to help guide me in understanding what the constraints are of the platform, because AdWords in particular is extremely complex, and I need to be aware of what's possible. And also, by partnering with engineering, I get a chance to learn about everything that's possible and all the technical innovation that I could put into my designs. And then I hand those designs over to an engineer, and then we work closely together to kind of ensure the quality of the product design.
So, hello everybody, my name is Irene, and I'm a software engineer, a technical lead, and a manager on the Google Plus team. I've been at Google for about 7.5 years, and I previously also worked on AdSense, Buzz, and Google Calendar. The role of the software engineer is actually to really focus on building the right product and getting that shipped at the right time. So a lot of our work, we work very closely with product and user experience experts to make sure we're defining the right experience together. And a lot of it is a balancing act in terms of making sure that what we're building is the right technical solution that scales properly and is extensible, but also something that we can get to users very, very quickly. And on the other side, we also get to work with the production folks, so test engineering, also release engineering and site reliability engineering, and just making sure that we have the latest best practices in place, and that it's pretty much impervious to anything that the world can throw at us.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Williams. I am a software engineer in test. I've been at Google for 2.5 years now, and I'm on the Glass team. But before that, I was on Chrome working on something called CloudPrint. So I'm actually going to take this opportunity to explain a couple of different roles, because people think they're the same thing. We have two roles called test engineer and software engineer in test. And a test engineer is more of your, like your typical I won't even say typical QA, but it's more like your QA type role where they're in charge of the test plans. They do work in automating tests. They're the user advocate. They make sure that like what they decide the product is supposed to do, the test engineer makes sure it actually does that. The software engineer in test, I think of it more as like a productivity engineer. We help make everybody else more productive. We create frameworks. We help, like if a test engineer is trying to figure out how to automate something, we'll help them figure out how to do that. If the software engineers are figuring out how to design their code so that it's more maintainable long term, we'll help them figure out how to do that. So we are very focused on quality and making sure that the development environment produces quality code at the end of the day. So that's pretty much what I do.
And I am Sabrina Farmer, and I am a site reliability engineer here at Google. I've been at Google now for 9 years, I think in 2 days or something like that.
Happy
so site reliability at Google is essentially we're a peer team with the software engineers, but our focus is on the production side of running the product, which includes failover and includes capacity management and performance of the products. And we're often the first responders to issues when they're identified either with scaling or difficulties in the infrastructure. What we do is we work with each of these different parts of engineering to sort of at the early stage when the product managers say, hey, we want to do this, we explain the speed of light, which is often required with the new features that they want to add. And then we work with the software engineers during the design phase to make sure they understand the infrastructure that they're running on and some of the limitations of that infrastructure so they can work around that. We will also, site reliability is about 50% software engineers, 50% systems engineers. And so we often have to build the systems that would mitigate the different kinds of failures. And so how users are distributed globally, that's often something that the SREs will develop. So that's the kind of engineering we do.
Great. So Irene, she touched on it a little bit of the balancing act that is engineering. And I was curious if we could quickly go through maybe what are some trade-offs in your role that you see, like certainly getting code out the door. What are the maybe constraints or the trade-offs that you have to make when either you're forced to get something out by X date, or maybe a major bug fix, something like that. So maybe some trade-offs that you guys do and you're getting code out the door.
I think for SRE, some of the things that we have to often work with the different teams on, because they really care about the velocity of getting things out the door. And when you work on a product like Gmail, you're going to instantly hit millions and millions of users all at one time. And so we often have to put controls in front of the releases that they want to do and phase it out. And so we put a lot of limitations on what they do and how often we want it, how slowly it needs to roll out and things like that. And they're driving towards getting it out the door as soon as possible. We're doing it so that we want to minimize the impact to the user or the risk to the user. And so we often compromise on that.
I would also add that trade-offs are just kind of a fact of life. It's just something that you have to be prepared for. And what we try to do when we look at trade-offs is make informed, intentioned trade-offs. So actually looking at what are the reasons where we're actually doing something, what is the right path to the long-term ideal, and then what are the right increments that you can do quickly to meet any sort of demands or deadlines that need to happen. So as long as they're made with informed intention and that you have a path to the ideal solution, they're usually okay. But it's just something that we work through.
Anyone else?
Well, I mean, I can add that sometimes we may need to leave certain features out if we are not able to make those part of the release. So that's another trade-off that we may be making sometimes.
Great. Anybody from the audience have any questions about the roles or maybe some of the challenges? Yes, please. Oh. Oh, sorry. Yes. So I'm a technical program manager, and I usually describe that as a project manager. And so I get engaged in efforts that could be fairly large in scope, from across Google and coordinating many different engineering teams or functional areas, to something maybe more intimate and specific, working maybe with engineering, like a specific team for either a feature launch or optimizing their velocity. So the TPM role at Google is in my opinion, I love it. It's a very, there's a lot of opportunity to apply different skills at different times. And then, of course, you get to work with all of these cool people. We have also a mic. So if anyone doesn't hear the question, we'll repeat it.
Hi, I have a question for the software engineers. How quickly or how regular do deployments happen, and how does that affect the timeline of releasing new features out on the Google Plus team?
Sure. So on the Google Plus team, we actually developed a method of releasing code to production every single business day. This is unprecedented at Google. Previous to that, I believe the record holder was Gmail, which managed to get the production release schedule down to once a week. Then we sort of stole their release engineer, because he's awesome. Basically gave him all the resources he needed and said, make this better. Like, do what you can to make this absolutely awesome so we can get features to our users as quickly as possible. So it's actually a really interesting process. I would say that everybody's involved. involved. So there are a core set of release engineers who are responsible for making sure the thing ships every day. But we have an on-call rotation that includes software engineering, includes tests. It includes all other aspects of sort of the pipeline to make sure that you're really aggressive about rolling back code that is broken, right? So instead of saying slowly debug the error, when you have hundreds of engineers writing into a single code base, look at what is the root cause, roll that back, and then you can roll it forward again with the correct fix. That way we have a clean cut that goes to production every single day, and we usually also have a different test build every single day that test is working with. So we have this very clean pipeline that goes through, and each day we make sure it happens. I think we've only missed like maybe 2 releases or something. I'm not sure, but it's some very small single-digit number.
I think people often think that releasing more frequently adds a lot of risk, right? But it actually takes away a lot of risk because you're not releasing something that has hundreds of features all at one time that are trying to work together, and then you have a problem and you have to figure out exactly what happened. So releasing more often is actually mitigating your risk to your users.
Great. Let's say here.
Yeah,
over here. We got the mic. Sorry. Yeah.
I have a question for Shuba. You mentioned that you moved from an engineering role to a product management role. Mm-hmm. What were the sort of skills that you had to learn as you moved into this new role, and how did you help a product move out, or the code move out of the door by learning these skills?
So I think what I had to learn was I needed to kind of come out of this, like, I'm going to sit at my desk and do my role, versus kind of learn a little bit more about, like, what are the problems and what are the, like, learn to prioritize those problems better and say which of these are more meaningful to tackle first. So kind of get my head out of the part that I was focused on and think broadly across the product. And what is the second part of your question? I'm sorry. How have these skills helped me in getting code out the door? Mm-hmm. So like I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of my work is actually acting as a liaison between the different teams that I work with. And so product management is definitely not like, I'm not the one writing all the code and getting things out the door. So I think my part is to actually be an evangelist for the product and to kind of keep kind of selling the product both to people in upper management and kind of say like, hey, this is a feature that needs to go out the door. This will really have this impact on this product. But also to kind of sell it to everybody else. For example, to Anya, who says like, but how is this going to help our users, right? Because that's going to be her first question. And so kind of like get buy off from people on what we are building and to then get it through the pipeline so we can get it out the door. Sure.
Right, sorry. I think microphones. Sorry. We'll get to everyone.
So do you have any advice for smaller companies that maybe don't have the resources to have, you know, teams and teams of highly talented people? Like, are there things that maybe can be streamlined in the process, in the pipeline, getting started to build up an organization, you know, with that sort of resource?
Sorry, was your question directed at me?
Oh no.
In general.
In general?
Okay.
Would anyone like to?
Yeah. One thing I would say for sure is to make sure that you take advantage of open source tools. Anything from a continuous build environment to project tracking tools to bug tracking tools, using automated test framework. And first of all, anything you can automate will help save you manpower, right? Because you don't have to have manual testers and you don't have to pay them to manually test your stuff if it's automated, and you can run it continuously. So setting those sorts of systems up early is really, really helpful.
And I can also add that if it's a user-facing tool or feature or product that you're working on, just go and talk to people who will be using your product as soon as possible. Even if you don't know exactly what questions to ask or don't know what the process to follow, just talking to them and telling them what you're doing, you'll already get a lot of feedback and insight, and better get that earlier rather than later.
And I would also just quickly add, it's like general framework, keeping things light and adaptable. So, you know, not really going in and prescribing any sort of process, but really looking at the workflow and figuring out, okay, maybe this is where we can tweak it a bit to make it a little easier. And that would just be seconding all the other comments there.
She's been,
yeah.
After being here for a whole day and seeing so many women, I feel like girls really do run the world, or maybe women run the world, or maybe even that women run Google, but I know that may not be the case. What is it like working here? What is it like? What challenges did you face to get here and work here every day? And are women running Google or having a serious impact on Google in the way that it seems right now, because it just seems like there are no men. So yeah.
Great. Well, there certainly are men at Google, but Google is very interested in women in leadership and diversity of the workforce. And so I think we all probably have different experiences, but also similar experiences that I feel as a woman at Google, I'm very supported. And kind of as Kimber mentioned, like if you are there and believing in yourself to go do it, there really, I don't see any restrictions, certainly not at Google.
Yeah, I wanted to add that I mentioned that I've been here for 8 years, and it's only, I mean, I think the last 2 or 3 years, I've noticed that when I go into meeting rooms, I'm no longer the sole woman there. In fact, like I worked on the display ads team prior to coming onto the Google Plus team, and I've worked with Anya before. And there was actually a meeting in which there were 8 women, 3 of whom were like technical leads. Anya was representing UX. There was a tech editor who was a woman, and there were no men in the room, and we all just went like, what happened here? And we have a lot of mentoring programs for women too, and I know Sabrina is on quite a few of those. She was just mentioning to me earlier.
Yeah, golly, where's
Both of us.
Yeah.
Both
Sabrina. The one thing I'll add is that I think this is a really great company because, for 2 reasons. One reason is because we have a lot of programs that are supporting any sort of minority, like either women or a racial minority or gender orientation, all that kind of stuff. So it's really nice that we support those things, but it's also really neat because when you're part of Google, you get to be a part of supporting those things, and it actually supports yourself in a weird way. So I've actually become much more comfortable as a Black female engineer since I've been here because of all of the things that Google does. I don't want to get into a big list of those sorts of things, but I'd be happy to talk to anyone afterwards who wants to find out more about programs that we have.
Hi, my question is for Shuba and Irene. When you mentioned daily releases of code, I was totally baffled. I worked at Expedia in the past, and we had reduced our cycle from 6 months down to 2 weeks. And beyond that, we didn't even think about daily. So what kind of challenges you face as a developer, and even for product management, when you lay out the feature, do you divide the iterations that these are the dates it should meet? And how do you even get to it on a daily basis?
I'll let Irene answer your part first.
Sure. So I'll take a first hack at that. How do we get to daily releases? One is just very, very good tools and very good hygiene. So a lot of what the software engineering and test team does is making sure that we have a lot of automated processes in place that can automatically catch the code and run tests on things. So when you check something in, you should know within a few minutes to a few hours, depending upon what you're running, whether or not that broke anything. So that's the first layer. And then we also have manual testers in place who do the next layer. So every single day we have a cut that goes out, which the test team takes a hard look at, and they start filing bugs immediately. So when we come into work the next morning as engineers, we can start boiling down this list and looking at things very directly as this is release blocking, this is not release blocking. So there's very good hygiene about saying what is blocking, what is not. And then when the things are blocking, you go and you chase those things down. Those are the things that we would say, like, you don't leave your desk until you're done finding out what the root cause actually is or getting it to the right team. Because a lot of the times it may not be in your code base, but maybe in somebody else's. And it's all about fast response, fast routing. So just really good hygiene and really good tools for getting that stuff through.
For my part, I actually find it makes my life a lot easier, because if the release date was like 2 weeks away and we didn't make it, and then we have to wait for 2 more weeks to release it, it's actually a pain, right? And so if we didn't make the next day's cut, then we'll make the day after that if possible. So it actually streamlines the development cycle and helps us get the product out the door faster. So we don't, I don't know if you're talking more about like, dividing the release, kind of like what goes out when. So we do have like a sense of timeline of what goes out when. Sometimes that is actually complicated by the fact that there are different teams involved in it, so it's like a cross-functional team launch, right? So we're not very specific about it has to go out on X day. If we couldn't make X day, we know why we couldn't make it and we know how we can fix it. We'll really aim to get it out the next, very next possible moment that we can. So we are not really tied down to like, we didn't make it on this day now. What do we do?
I would say also there's generally an understanding of it goes out when it's ready to go out, and we do all our best efforts to basically say, here's the code completion date that we're targeting based on the estimates and the features we've agreed upon. And we communicate very, very early if that's not actually going to happen, so that we can throw the right resources behind actually saying, well, is it just we can put more engineers behind this and it can happen, or do we need to cut something and that can happen, or is the date just not important and it's more important to get the right experience out later, a little bit later?
I would agree with that.
So it's a lot of communication, yeah.
Do we have, okay.
Hi. I'm curious about the specific distinctions at Google between the product manager and the program manager, and about how those two teams of managers work together to balance the priorities on their engineers between, you know, Google-wide projects as well as product-specific projects.
Great. Do you want to go first? Or?
Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, like, so my role is more to kind of look at the strategy, come up with the features that we can ship to make the product better. And things get really complicated when you're talking about like multiple teams across different functions. For example, like a launch that we did recently with Google Plus and the local team. So those kinds of things can get really complicated because then you have like two sets of product managers, two sets of like UI designers, and like basically everything. And plus they talk to like backend teams, we talk to backend teams, and all kinds of fancy stuff like that. And then project managers or program managers really come in and kind of help us all kind of see the timelines, keep us on our toes, and they're the ones that really drive the project through and make sure that it goes on time. And Rebecca can speak more to that.
Yeah, right. So we do partner very closely. Project managers, are usually the ones talking schedules and timelines and priorities and trying to help fit this sequence of work and development together for a reasonable outcome, whether it be a feature launch or something along those lines. So, so we all partner together, the program managers and the product. So, thank you. I think we have time maybe for one more question. Okay, and we can always pick it up afterwards as well. Just find us.
Hello, I'm a UX designer, so this is mostly directed at Anya. One of the themes that came up several times in the earlier talks and sessions is the importance of prototyping. So I was wondering what the role of prototyping is at Google in getting code out the door.
Really important one. So it is product dependent. I think people different products with prototype and using different tools. But we typically do have at least one or two dedicated prototypers per product group. So in my case with AdWords, we have one prototyper, and she's actually doing some amazing work right now, and it's another she, here we go, collaborating with prototyper across all of ads, which is a really, really big group, to create a single prototyping platform, which is basically a set of an established CSS, a set of widgets that we can all share so that we can more quickly produce the prototypes. So that's been really awesome. It's made it a lot faster and easier to create them. And as far as what is their role, we often use them to sell a product idea. Sometimes we use them for reviews. Anytime people see things like moving and see things actually interacting, it's a lot easier to sell that design idea. Somehow click-through mocks don't always have that same wow factor. So as far as the role, I think it's to sell, to demonstrate functionality that, especially transitions, for instance, which you can't really do with static mocks. And also, of course, usability testing. I think it's a lot easier to test something that you can actually interact with than have to linearly click through.
Yeah. If it's okay, I would like to give an example of a great prototype that we had experience with. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Google Plus rewrite that we delivered last year during I/O 2013, but it was a total rewrite of the system that introduced a multi-column grid that had responsive layout and that morphed between multiple different columns based on your browser size. Now, it would have been really difficult to try this out on production quality code really, really quickly. So we had a couple different prototypers actually build this prototype, do user testing with it, actually say, like, these are the features that we want, these are the features features that we thought were really awesome, but actually once we wrote them, we really don't want them. And that was a very good way of testing out new ideas extremely quickly and iterating quickly without having to build on the production stack, which can take a lot longer. So we use prototyping a lot to make sure that these ideas are fleshed out and that they are solid before we actually dedicate a lot of engineering time to them as well.
Great. Well, thank you for attending, and thank you, panelists.